Good afternoon. Welcome to this month's Interior Museum Lunchtime Lecture Series. Each month we highlight one of our bureaus and their diverse workings here in not only America but also abroad. But this month we are stepping out of the interior and highlighting the National Geographic and one of the programs that works closely with a multitude of our bureaus here at the interior. Mary Ford is the Director of Education Programs at the National Geographic Society. Mary has an undergraduate degree in environmental science and policy from Harvard University and a master's degree in environmental management from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. Her career has focused on environmental education and citizen science. She has worked at the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies, the World Wildlife Fund, the Council for Environmental Education, and the National Audubon Society. She has taught preschool, middle school, and high school, and has done ecology research in such diverse areas as Borneo to Siberia. Mary has served on the board of North American Association for Environmental Education, the advisory board of Toyota Together Green, and the board and education of and the board of the Education Working Group of the Citizen Science Association. Please join me in welcoming Mary Ford.
Hello, and thank you for coming out to hear about BioBlitz, which I love to talk about. You're welcome to interrupt with questions, and I'll take questions at the end as well. But I'm especially happy to be here at Interior just because Interior agencies have been really our best partners, National Geographic's best partners, and have really helped to expand the idea of BioBlitz and popularize it throughout the United States. So, what is a BioBlitz? I suspect a lot of people here already know, but I do like to talk about the definition when I'm talking to folks. And in particular, I want to sort of highlight this definition. It's an intensive survey of a defined area, inventorying as many species as possible in a short amount of time. So what that means is that to do a BioBlitz, you basically pick a defined area, often a park. It could be a schoolyard or any other kind of area where you can set boundaries. And you set time boundaries as well. Now, in the big BioBlitzes that National Geographic has done in partnership with the National Park Service, those have typically been 24 hours or stretching out to 2 days. But a BioBlitz can be as short as 45 minutes in a class period, for instance. You just need to set your parameters. So a defined amount of time, relatively short. Sometimes they're longer, like some of the national parks have done week-long BioBlitzes, but a relatively short amount of time in a defined area. And then importantly, you're not counting the number of different organisms that you find, but the number of species in a traditional BioBlitz. I've seen other BioBlitzes get more in depth with different protocols, but the basic idea is counting species, which makes it an approachable scientific endeavor for members of the public. So I like to emphasize those ideas, that it can be any amount of time, any place, but you want to have boundaries on those things. Now, before I go any further in describing my perspective on what makes a BioBlitz work, I'm going to let Imani tell you about her experience with BioBlitz. Now, she's been to a couple of different BioBlitzes in different national parks, but this video was filmed in Jean Lafitte National Historic Park and Preserve outside of New Orleans.
I really love getting dirty now. It's like a beautiful thing that just happened. My name is Imani and I am 7 years old. I'm going to tell you about my experience about BioBlitz. I traveled to New Orleans, Louisiana for BioBlitz 2013. It seems like it took forever. We went with the park ranger Stacy in the bayou at Jean Lafitte National Park to do an inventory. An inventory is when you go out with a scientist or a park ranger to discover animals you've never seen before. I saw a snake, a turtle, and a newt. I let the newt crawl my hand to my arm. When the new one on my arm, it tickled. It was so ticklish. That's all I can say. I fell in the mud too. It was really gross. There were spiders and everything. Well, I first didn't like it, and then I loved it a lot.
It was very liberating going through the mud.
My butt is stuck!
Okay, ready?
Just took a stick from the floor and kept on walking with it.
Imani was very fearful of anything that flew or crawled.
But now I'm not scared anymore. I discovered a worm I adopted named Holly. I now appreciate living things and beauty in them. Oh, a bird! I met a lot of cool people from National Geographic and the National Park Service. I felt like an explorer, and I felt like I could touch anything. BioBlitz helps us to learn to help animals around the world. I love BioBlitz. Now I told you about my BioBlitz. What's yours?
So we were able to bring Imani back to our big BioBlitz last year that we held on the National Mall here, and her mom and her sister. And she still loves science and just finished a genetics camp last summer and is planning to be a scientist. So I love that story showing how BioBlitz can touch the hearts and minds of children. But I do want to emphasize also that the idea of a BioBlitz isn't something that belongs exclusively to National Geographic or the National Park Service. It's an idea that is used all over the world. The term is used all over the world. It's used even in places where the word BioBlitz isn't translated into a different language. It's just used, that same word. And so I just collected some logos from around different BioBlitzes that have happened around the country, or around the world, excuse me, in different places. And just so you can see that this term really is used broadly and used in some different ways, but typically means an inventory of species in a defined area in a defined amount of time. And there are a lot of BioBlitzes going on, in particular in the UK, in Australia, in Mexico, and increasingly across Europe. So it is a global phenomenon. But it did start right here in Washington, D.C. at Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens, which is where this picture is from, which is a national park property. And a biologist from USGS, Sam Draghi, had the idea to bring together as many scientists as possible on one day to catalog as many species as possible at Kenilworth. And it was a grand success. That was in 1996, and it has just grown since then. And both National Geographic and the National Park Service really embraced this idea and came up with the idea to collaborate on BioBlitzes in a different national park every year for the decade leading up to the centennial of the Park Service last year. So that's what we did. And we had these goals, joint goals, which were to provide scientists and the public an opportunity to do fieldwork together, to add to each park's official species list, and to highlight the importance of protecting these places. So you can see that there is a scientific goal here, the adding to the official species list, but there are also outreach and almost sort of marketing goals as well. So something I love about BioBlitz and about citizen science more generally is it often can do a good job of accomplishing both science goals and outreach goals at the same time. And I'll say that we have had some great finds over the years of quite a few species, almost every year, at least one species that's new to a park, sometimes new to a state. And then, of course, another important scientific outcome of BioBlitz has been tracking the expansion of invasive species. We've found invasive species that had not yet previously been identified within a park's boundaries, particularly when we were in Hawaii. So, of course, that's good to know, right? So just having all those eyes and feet on the ground looking really helps. So this is just the geographic spread of the BioBlitzers that we did with Park Service for the first 9 years of our collaboration. And you can see the idea was to have them in different ecosystems all over the country, including a marine BioBlitz in Biscayne National Park in Florida, a tropical BioBlitz in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. But most of them were in parks that were near or in urban areas, One, so that we could get a lot of local people coming out and getting to know their own backyard parks. And two, because we found that a lot of people who live in cities just don't realize how much nature there is under their feet. So it's just a great opportunity. An urban BioBlitz is a great opportunity to inspire people who live right next to urban nature. So that was our first 9 years, and then this was our 10th year of collaboration. To celebrate the centennial, we decided to do BioBlitzes all over the country in collaboration with Park Service. So many parks held BioBlitzes. And then we also worked with National Geographic's Network of Alliances for Geographic Education, which are nonprofits based at universities that focus on getting professors and teachers collaborating around projects involving geography. So we asked each alliance to do at least one BioBlitz in their state, and in some cases they collaborated with national parks, and in other cases they did BioBlitzes in schoolyards or in state parks or in urban parks. And the idea really took off, and we ended up helping to sponsor 278 BioBlitzes in 2016. And so the different colors of pins on this map are some of the darker pins I think are the national parks, and the lighter pins are the alliances. But there were a lot of collaborative BioBlitzes as well. So 278 events total, 207 events with our alliances, 131 Park Service BioBlitzes. Again, those numbers don't add up because some of them were collaborative. And then this number, 157,000 plus observations or records of species found during our BioBlitzes throughout 2016. And some of you may have been at this big event we had. Our cornerstone event was on the National Mall last year, and we had 400 scientists helping us with that event. And 2 days, one was a day a lot like today, so very, very rainy, but we had 10,000 people come out nevertheless, so a great event. And it was so fun to have it here in DC and really just to highlight DC nature. So the basic components of our BioBlitzes with the Park Service have been Friday events and Saturday events. On Fridays, we've focused on bringing out teachers and students to participate with scientists in the field. And on Saturdays, we've opened up the inventories with scientists so that the public could participate. And then we also have hosted a Biodiversity Festival with lots of performances and interactive booths and so forth throughout both days. And I didn't start working on BioBlitzes until around 2012, but previous to that, I think the Biodiversity Festival hadn't yet been added. And the reason the idea of the Biodiversity Festival came to be was that the BioBlitzes were attracting so many people. There were too many people to actually get out and do science. So the Biodiversity Festival was meant to accommodate folks who were overflow, who couldn't actually get out in the field with scientists. So that's a good problem to have. But importantly, the reason why we've had our events on Friday and Saturday is to accommodate both schools and the public. So I do recommend that when people ask me when's the best time to hold a BioBlitz, although of course it does not have to cover 2 days. It can be much shorter than that. So here's just a photo of a student inventory from a BioBlitz last year. And the way we've handled student inventories is that we have raised money to cover transportation costs so that there's no cost to schools to bring their students to us. Last year, schools that had problems with lunches, we paid for the lunches just to make sure there were zero barriers to participation in terms of money anyway. And we do a lot of outreach working with the local Park Service unit to try to bring the kids in. Yeah.
What were your principal sources for funding for the school?
So we had actually a big grant from Verizon, helped to pay for a lot of it, and they also loaned us hundreds of tablets to record data on, so that they were a great source of help. In the past, they've also loaned us what they call a cow, which is a cell on wheels, which can boost a mobile signal in an area. We weren't able to do that in DC, but in some of our more remote parks, having that support was helpful. So having the support of a telecom company, a wireless company, was very, very helpful. We've also had a number of smaller family foundations contribute funding as well. And on Saturdays, we have public inventories, or starting usually like Friday afternoon, evening, usually led by a park ranger or another scientist. And these inventories have typically had a fairly specific taxonomic focus to match the expertise of the inventory leader, that is the park ranger or the scientist. So they might be focused on birds or insects or plants. But you can record anything you see while out on an inventory. And in fact, you can see someone recording data on her tablet in the background there. And so this is how we record data. This is a kid, again, in Jean Lafitte National Historic Park. And he is taking a picture of something that he sees there in the bayou. But he's not just taking a picture, he's recording it in iNaturalist. So who here has used iNaturalist? A few of you have, great. Okay, I hope a lot of you will this afternoon. Well, maybe not when it's raining, but on the next nice day. It is such a cool thing, and it just keeps getting cooler. So the idea behind iNaturalist, which is a free app for Android and iPhone, and also a website, is it's essentially a social network for biodiversity observations. So you have a profile on there, and what you can do is upload observations of anything that you see, and then other people who are part of the community, and there are hundreds of thousands of people on there, other people help you identify what you've seen. Or you may know what it is, and then other people will confirm your identification. But if you have no idea you've taken a picture of an insect, you have no idea what it is, put it up there, and other people will help identify it. And then you can also access and look at data, all the other data that people put up, because it is open source, available for anyone to use. There are protections in place for endangered species, so you can't access data around endangered species to protect against poaching and that kind of thing. Now, what's really, really, really cool about iNaturalist, that it was just literally yesterday released, was that they have now integrated computer vision, artificial intelligence. So now the app guesses what it is that you saw. So for instance, a couple days ago was in Minnesota and saw a juvenile red-tailed hawk. I wasn't quite sure what it was, and I entered it into the app. I had a beta version, and entered it into the app, and sure enough, the app knew, based on the database of photos already entered into iNaturalist, it knew that it was a red-tailed hawk. And later on, some real people came along and identified it as well, so I knew it was correct. So you can get real-time identifications, yeah.
Did you enter it by submitting a photo? Or
Yeah.
did you have a field report?
No, I'll talk a little bit more about how it works, but basically the main kind of data that you submit to iNaturalist is a photo with a geotag and a date and timestamp. Those are the three pieces of data you need to make a complete data point. A verifiable data point is a photo or a sound recording, a geotag, and a date and timestamp. You can also upload data that doesn't have a photo, which does happen a lot with birds, for instance, but then it can't be verified by someone else. So, and this happens to be the website from the BioBlitz that we did in Hawaii volcanoes with the totals of everything that we saw there. But so here's the basic way that iNaturalist works. This is an example from when I was at a BioBlitz in Australia in 2014 at the World Parks Congress. And I saw this amazing thing there that I had never seen before, this dog vomit slime mold, which is its real common name. So I was looking down at it, and an Australian park ranger came up to me and said, "I know what you're thinking, but that is not vomit, that's dog vomit slime mold." And so I was sort of skeptical. So I took a picture of it and I submitted it to iNaturalist. And I did add my identification because I thought this park ranger was probably correct. So here, where that red circle is, you can see that my ID, I was guessing that it was dog vomit slime mold. But I also clicked this button that said, "I need ID help," which meant I'm not sure of the identification. And so then other people in the online community came along and confirmed that, sure enough, it was dog vomit slime mold. So I got this community ID. So once two people agree, or 2/3 of the people who have submitted identifications for your observation, once there's 2/3 agreement, then it will be considered a verified data point. So if there's a lot of dissent, if people disagree, then you won't get to a verification status until there is a consensus identification. But in this case, everyone agreed it was dog vomit slime mold. So then the really cool thing that happened was this observation was invited. Part of what can happen on iNaturalist is you can set up all kinds of projects with different taxonomic or geographic focuses. And then you can, anyone who's administering those projects, which can be anyone, it's just free for anyone to use, you can invite people's observations into your project so that you can include them in your data set. So this observation was invited into the Slime Molds of the World project run by some slime mold scientists. And so I thought, sure, you can use my observation there. And then I clicked on this project though just to check it out, and look at all these incredible slime molds there are out there. So many. So what I really loved about this particular experience was that just through my submitting this one piece of data, then I got just sort of connected into a community of people who were interested in slime molds that I knew nothing about. So it ended up being like a good learning experience for me as well, even though my intention was initially just to contribute data to this BioBlitz. So that's what iNaturalist can allow you to do. So iNaturalist is based at the California Academy of Sciences, but it's all free and open source for anyone to use. Do you have a question?
Yeah, what really is dog vomit, slime mold?
Well, so slime mold is a particular kind of organism that's rather unique. This one is just, and these are all different, probably different genera of slime molds here. But you're stretching my knowledge of slime molds at this point. But it's different than a regular mold. But in dog vomit, slime mold truly just, it just looks like dog vomit, but it's not at all. It has nothing to do with that. I don't know why somebody actually named it that. I guess they were just very literal. But these are all slime molds. You can see they all look quite different from each other. I was putting together this slide a while ago when I was on an airplane, and the guy sitting next to me finally asked, "Where do you work?" And this is the iNaturalist homepage. This is a screenshot I took yesterday, so you could go and look at it online as well. This is from the service-wide BioBlitz. That is, it includes the results from all the BioBlitzes that we held in 2016 across all National Park Service units. So you can see that we had over 146,000 observations across the service, and over 13,000 species identified. It shows 7,000 people participating. That number is a little bit misleading because, for instance, with teachers, when teachers bring their classes out, we typically don't have kids create their own login for iNaturalist if they are under 13 to protect their privacy. So we often have them just logging in under their teacher's name or some kind of class name that the teacher has picked. So there are lots of people who tend to use the same username on iNaturalist. So I'm sure that number is actually much higher than 7,000, the number of people who participated in contributing to iNaturalist in 2016 in the parks. And these are just a couple of interesting results slides. This just shows that the kinds of species that we found across the Park Service. So plants, insects, fungi, birds were the most common kinds. And then the most observed species was the western fence lizard, American robin, mallard, Canada goose, typical, a lot of predictable species up there. And then the most observed introduced species you can see, honeybee, starling, garlic mustard. And the most observed threatened species, osprey, chimney swift, red-headed woodpecker. So just tons of interesting information you can get out of iNaturalist. Now, what happens to the data after they go into iNaturalist? Well, first of all, they're totally open for anyone to download and use, and we often encourage teachers to download the data and use the data in their classrooms. It works really well with the next generation science standards and the emphasis on using authentic data in the classroom. But also, iNaturalist data are, once they're verified, that is, if users agree on the species level identification of an observation, those data points are automatically shared with the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which is an open source database available for any biologist or policymaker to use, funded by multiple national governments around the world. So it's used all over the world. And the iNaturalist data just become part of this heavily used open source database. You can see there are over 800 million records in here, so it's a really, really rich data source, and there are hundreds of peer-reviewed papers published using these data every year. Now, in the case of the BioBlitzes that we held at the National Park Service and NPS units, the data also went into the NP species database and into the bison database, which is used across the federal government. So that's another thing I love about BioBlitzes is that the data are really used. We know that they get used heavily both within the Park Service for management decisions and then as part of this global database as well. So in addition to these inventories where we're out collecting data, we also have hosted these Biodiversity Festivals. So this is just a glimpse at what we do in the festivals. This was the festival we had on the mall with 50 different exhibitors, usually federal agencies or state agencies, local nonprofits, local government agencies. We have speakers, so here's Secretary Jewell entertaining the crowd. We have performances. This is the Forest Service performing here with some familiar mascots. And cultural demonstrations. These are members of the Piscataway tribe, which are from this area and who are from this area. And then we have all these interactive booths. We've asked our exhibitors to have interactive activities available to kids. Here they're sorting through organic material looking for invertebrates that they then entered into iNaturalist. And every year we've provided these Biodiversity University certificates and badges. So when kids complete a certain number of activities at the festival, they earn these badges. And we've had it set up so that you could earn a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate of biodiversity. This is from Golden Gate National Recreation Area, where we had our big BioBlitz in 2014. Now, an important part of what we've done too is we have offered teacher training for teachers who are bringing their classes to us. And this has turned out to be critical. I really wasn't sure how much it would matter until we did a big evaluation last year of the various components of our BioBlitz efforts, including the effect of teacher training. We had the teachers for about 4 or 5 hours with us. We just did a lot of training on the logistics and the purpose of BioBlitz, sort of the biology behind BioBlitz, and how to use iNaturalist. And this turned out to be really meaningful for them. So I highly, highly encourage investment in some teacher training. We did not make it required for teachers to come, but we did give them an incentive if they came to teacher training and brought their kids to the BioBlitz and filled out all of our evaluation forms. Then they actually got a tablet to keep for their classroom and some other National Geographic swag. So part of what we've offered to teachers as well is these free lesson plans online. Now on nationalgeographic.org, we have a big education portion of our website, and it's all free stuff that can be downloaded. So we created some BioBlitz specific lesson plans, especially for use before and after BioBlitzes. So if anyone here is doing a BioBlitz, feel free to use these as well. The lesson plans designed for before BioBlitz focus on what biodiversity conservation is and what different species are and how you understand what the concept of a species. And then the activities for after the BioBlitz focus on analysis of data, and you can use the actual data from your event to do those lessons. So then I just wanted to share a few of our evaluation results. We do have a big evaluation report that was conducted, the research was conducted, or the evaluation was conducted by the Lawrence Hall of Science at the University of California at Berkeley. It's easy to find our whole evaluation report on informalscience.org, which is run by the federal government, but also I can send it to anyone who's interested. But here are a few highlights. 85% of the students liked BioBlitz. 87% of the students felt that BioBlitz was educational. Public respondents were overwhelmingly positive. That's great to see. It's not that surprising because the public opt into it, so we already know that they like it if they're bothering to come. So I'm more excited about the student results because the students were actually just required to come. And then, unsurprisingly, we found through some observational work that we had some researchers actually observing groups out there, and the people did really respond strongly in a positive way to hands-on activities using real scientific equipment. Now, benefits for teachers are really interesting. 89% of them agreed that it was a good teaching tool. 86% thought it was a good use of their time. 91% reported that the experience increased their likelihood of conducting future field trips in nature, so that is great to hear. And then this was the result that I thought was very instructive, was that students of teachers who participated in professional development before the BioBlitz were much more likely to show improvements on a variety of scales, like both in terms of learning knowledge and learning skills, and increased attitude of concern for the environment. So that brief professional development experience for teachers really made a difference. And I just wanted to mention that, we're actually not working with the Park Service right now on any BioBlitzes, that we completed our decade of collaboration and we're all figuring out what to do next. But we are trying to support schoolyard and backyard BioBlitzes all over. These are easier to conduct than giant events in national parks, and really instructive in terms of figuring out what's right in your own schoolyard. So, and they work remarkably well. Like, I did a BioBlitz in Baltimore a few years ago in a schoolyard in Baltimore that was truly covered in asphalt, the whole schoolyard. And nevertheless, the BioBlitz was very interesting because there actually are a lot of different kinds of plants that grow through cracks. There's a lot of insects and a lot of birds that wander through a schoolyard, so you really can do it almost anywhere. This is a schoolyard in the Central Valley of California. We found all kinds of interesting things and compared what we found in the schoolyard to what we found on a nearby farm, so that was fascinating. And because we really believe in, National Geographic really believes in supporting the schoolyard and backyard BioBlitzes, we have a lot of resources on our website, again available for free, to help teachers and community organizers put together these kinds of events. So do-it-yourself BioBlitz videos and activity sheets and plans for how you conduct things, guides to how to put together a BioBlitz. So, please take advantage of those things if they would be useful to you. And they're just all easy to find if you just go on the National Geographic site in the education section and type in BioBlitz. And the last point I wanted to make here is just a promotion for the Citizen Science Association, which actually just yesterday got its 501c3 nonprofit status, so it's its own standalone organization now, but we've been working on putting together, a number of people and institutions have been working on putting it together over the course of the last few years. And it's supporting citizen science, including BioBlitzes, but all kinds of citizen science projects, and supporting practitioners, and it is a great and growing resource. Just had a conference again this year. There will be another conference in 2019. But there's a free journal and a listserv and all kinds of resources, a job board, etc. So I really encourage anyone who's interested in citizen science to check out the website and see how the CSA might be able to provide useful resources. And that's all. This is my email, and you are welcome to contact me at any time if you want any of these resources, and I'm happy to take questions. Yeah.
I appreciate you acknowledging the Park Service's 1996 outlets. That was my office that did that.
Oh, yeah?
And I worked that.
Oh, that is so cool.
And as far as I'm concerned, and as far as we're concerned back then, is specifically Susan Ruby coined the term BioBlitz.
Oh.
Maybe you can confirm that. Maybe you have records from before, say, June '96. But
no, that's what I think. That's what we've heard too. Is that the term came from that event?
Yeah. So I remember that, and I appreciate that. In regard to the reporting systems and iNaturalist, you can put in photos of the actual species or sounds, bird calls, whatever. Can you put in, tracks?
Yes.
Some species have.
Yeah. Okay, so that is a great question. So, yeah, you can put in any scat, tracks, skeletons or carcasses. So anything that is an identifiable sign of a species, they do accept that. It's been interesting for the folks at iNaturalist to refine what they do accept, and we actually ran into some complications around that with some BioBlitzes held in Alaska, where there were folks who really wanted to record traditional uses of natural resources of species, and it's not something iNaturalist has ever embraced before. The idea of a species, a picture of a species that has already been used as a resource in some way, like for a rug or a coat or something like that. But folks who were doing BioBlitzes up in Alaska, they really wanted to record that as part of their understanding of the ecosystem that they were studying and the way people lived in that ecosystem. So there are ongoing conversations about that, but and we don't include rocks. Lots of kids want to take pictures of rocks. So any sign of a living organism out in the wild is totally acceptable. Also, there is a box to mark for something that's clearly cultivated. So we encourage people to take pictures of planted trees and so forth, but you should mark the box cultivated. Although recently the scientists who run iNaturalist have said that if something was clearly planted by a person but now survives without any maintenance by gardeners or something like that, then it's essentially wild. Otherwise, everything in a city would be considered cultivated, right? But they're interested in seeing like what thrives, what survives in a city. So if something's surviving without being watered and fed, then we consider it a wild organism in iNaturalist. And I should mention also that iNaturalist is designed so that it works in the field without any signal. So you can record all your data in the app and then upload it, sync it with the website when you're back in cell service or in Wi-Fi. So that's how most scientists use it in the field when you're far away from any kind of signal. So you don't have to worry about connectivity wherever you are. Someone else had a question?
Can you give examples of how the data has been used maybe by the federal government?
So I know that, like for instance, on the GW Memorial Parkway, they've been very thorough. They've done a couple of BioBlitzes on their own without National Geographic, so they have a really good understanding of what they have, and they've used it to make decisions around what to manage for in terms of natural resources. So, what is most important to protect? What do we have here that's relatively unique compared to the surrounding region? That kind of thing. Now, in Hawaii volcanoes, we found I think it was a kind of snake. I think it was called the blind snake. I'm not sure. So as soon as they found that, was first recorded observation of that, and so they started making a plan for how to deal with that invasive species, that kind of thing. And let me think of other things that I know about. There was another instance in California of a snail that had actually never been seen in California before, an invasive snail that had never been seen before. So again, a need to manage for invasive species. But a lot of parks have told us that their primary goal, scientific goal for BioBlitz, has been that they want to update their species list. They want to have as thorough an understanding as possible of what is on their land, and then to make management decisions from there. Yeah.
I spent a lot of my career tromping around in the Anacostia wetlands.
Yeah.
Around DC, and it's always been curious to me about how best to handle working with young people in that kind of environment. Same thing with like the Anacostia Watershed Society.
Yeah.
In regard to it, it's always great getting like Imani, getting them out in the field and getting them dirty and all that. But I also dealing with toxics and those kinds of things. And how do you do you like down in the bayou with Imani? Did her parents sign releases?
Mm-hmm.
Do you do that, or
we do. They do sign. Yes, they
ahead of time.
So they sign very extensive releases, actually. So, and we've had, some parents are quite concerned about the releases, and we've had teachers before ask us, can you have a briefer release? But we do actually have a very, very thorough release form that we have them sign. That said, we have never had a situation where kids have interacted with anything particularly dangerous or toxic. Something like, working somewhere where there are a lot of remnants of human activity, that is really challenging. In other situations, when I worked in Poughkeepsie, New York, we were doing a lot of water sampling in a river, and ran into drug paraphernalia and things like that, and really had to think about, well, is it safe to have kids there? And in the end, we did because we wanted them to understand what was happening in their neighborhoods, but we just had very, very careful supervision, and we're very upfront with the parents about where we were going and what we were doing.
That was an issue here with the drug paraphernalia.
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
Potomac shorelines, and I mean, you think ahead and you develop some protocols. One system that was used, I think Alice Ferguson Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
I think one supervisor or crew leader, whatever you want to call it, a responsible person would carry a jug with I think they had like a mix of plaster of Paris, something like that.
Oh.
And then, so everyone was instructed not to touch
Yeah.
it, or call, the leader.
Yeah.
And that individual was trained or had gloves. Or
Yeah, sure.
balls to pick it up and put it in.
Oh, that's a really good system.
But,
Yeah.
there may be problems that this is some years ago. I don't know what the latest is, but
Yeah.
it's a concern because you see that kind of stuff out there all the time.
Yeah, and I do think it's an important thing to address because otherwise we're just going to perpetuate the problem that the kids who are in urban areas that really don't get a lot of outdoor exposure, they're never going to get it because the outdoors has these sort of safety issues associated with it. So we have also done some pre-BioBlitz cleanups, which does help. Actually, we did that in New Orleans as well. Helps to make sure there aren't a lot of safety issues out there, but of course you never know what happens the night before. So I'm glad you brought that up. That is a concern, and I think we want to continue to figure it out. We can't just abandon our urban nature because of those issues. Yeah.
So what is the ratio between the scientists or the park ranger to
Oh yeah, that's an excellent question, which we've worked on a lot because, in order to accommodate a lot of people, we need the right number of scientists, and we have never paid our scientists. We've just recruited them, and we've given them a nice a dinner beforehand, the night before every BioBlitz, to go over all the protocols and so forth, but also to treat them to a nice dinner. So we've typically aimed for no more than 20 per group. When we have a class, we almost always divide the class into half with at least one expert per group of 10 or 15 kids. And sometimes we keep the group much smaller depending on the protocols of what the scientist is doing. Sometimes they're using a really careful protocol or using equipment that they only have so many objects of. And so 20 is sort of the maximum. We did something this past year that I think worked pretty well, which is this is an innovation from the Park Service. It was we had some volunteers who were called iNaturalist Pro Observers. I don't know where that name came from exactly, but the idea was that they were experts sort of iNaturalist experts who had been trained in iNaturalist. They did training or a webinar with us, so they really understood how to do iNaturalist, and they were in charge of recording data. So that meant that the scientist or the leader of every inventory didn't have to record the data, actually. And so that freed up the scientists both to actually look for things and to interact with members of the public. So that allowed us to accommodate more people, or at least to have a more interactive experience. So every inventory, almost every inventory, we staffed with a volunteer scientist and a volunteer pro observer who did the data recording. I should also say that when we talk about scientists, a lot of times they are professional scientists, or of course working with the Park Service, our rangers are great resources. But we've also found that some of the very best experts for BioBlitzes are amateur naturalists who are very familiar with their local environment, master naturalist programs, master gardener programs, Audubon chapters, really, really terrific sources of people who really know their stuff. And we don't have to worry so much about their credentials because when they put their data into iNaturalist, it can automatically be checked. And another aspect of what we've done in terms of using iNaturalist for BioBlitzes is this past year we had identification parties. So how iNaturalist works best is if everybody uploads their data from the field, and then we make sure that all of the data are identified and verified. So every picture has an identification to go with it, and that two people agree on that identification. And that happens organically on the site. It will happen even faster now that computer vision is integrated. But it happens just because people online are always going through and identifying things. But you can speed it up by encouraging people to go on and help with the identification. So we'd had actually in-person gatherings where we fed people pizza, and we sat around for a couple hours going through all the pictures from the BioBlitz and identifying with experts or amateur experts what each thing was. So identification parties, they worked really, really, really well. It's so much more fun to go through photos like that and do the identifications if you're with a bunch of people eating pizza. And then we've done it even informally, actually. My friends and I who love iNaturalist, we've just gotten together on a Saturday afternoon to identify things on iNaturalist, which is a great way to spend your afternoon if you're really geeky. Yeah, I know. But this is Washington, D.C. There are tons of geeky people out there. So, and I suspect throughout DOI, there's a lot of people who love to identify species. Yeah.
Are there any BioBlitzes scheduled for this area in the next year?
Well, so there are tons of BioBlitzes going on, just in, like organized locally. So I know there's an Anacostia watershed BioBlitz at the end of September. I actually can just Google in a second here to get the exact dates of that. National Geographic right now isn't involved in any BioBlitzes this in 2017 at all. But we are putting together this new program of basically grant-making program to support BioBlitzes across the country. So hopefully in 2018, if it all comes together properly, then folks will be able to apply for funding and for marketing and training support from National Geographic. We want to expand the model further. There's only so much we can do with staff involvement, but if we can kind of support all the great things happening across the country, that's even better. So I look forward to that in 2018, and there should be a lot happening in 2018. But there are a lot of things going on now, just all over. There's a lot of great Baltimore BioBlitzes now. The National Aquarium has a great staff that runs BioBlitzes. So, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the alliances with universities, professors, and students?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that, but that is changing now. So for 30 years, National Geographic had this system in place where we funded these nonprofits in every state. And the idea behind them was to get more teachers teaching geography. There was an identified need for better geography education. So it was basically like pairing geography professors with teachers, with K-12 teachers. And for years they taught fairly traditional, like map-based geography. And in the last 5 years, we've been trying to get them all to see geography as a broader subject matter that integrates all kinds of social sciences and sciences. And so we had our geography professors out doing BioBlitzes and teaching citizen science and with a geographic lens. So we really enjoyed doing that, but then the National Geographic Board decided that instead of that we should have actually a regional model. So as of 2019, we're shifting to having regional National Geographic offices across the country that will focus on professional development for teachers. So we won't have the alliances anymore as of 2019, but instead we'll have these regional offices doing events. They'll have a festival in every state in the spring, starting in 2019, and each festival will actually involve a BioBlitz as well. But the whole idea behind the alliances and now behind the regional model is like getting more people to teach geography and more students to learn geography. But our vision at National Geographic, our vision for what geography is very broad. I mean, our mission has always been to teach people about the world and all that's in it. So it includes a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Are you doing this presentation anytime in the future locally again?
I haven't planned on it. I'm happy to do it or to share slides with folks for anyone that would be useful. Yeah.
So I have a question about in the new model that you're developing where you're supporting, trying to provide grants and support for sites. How will you match the educators and the people, the leaders who have the access to the people with the site managers
So the idea is that we at National Geographic won't be in charge of that, because that is really intensive and requires a lot of local expertise. Like, we were able to do it fairly well here in DC, where we know a lot of folks. It's much harder in other parts of the country. So the idea is to give a grant and some technical support to a local organization, and then to share with them everything that we've done that's been successful in recruiting scientists and finding teachers and that kind of thing. But the actual recruiting of all the interested parties will be by the local organization that gets the grant. But we can share things like templates for invitations and letters explaining to teachers what it is and why they should do it, and videos we've used to recruit teachers to be involved, and all the techniques and sources we've used to recruit scientists as well.
Well, in order to get the grant, will you have to show that you already have some of that going on?
Yeah, I think you have to show that you have the capacity to do that. I don't think you would have to have all the contacts lined up at all, but just to show that you know there are networks that you can tap into. But I don't expect that we'll want to be very strict about that, because we want to invite people in to do BioBlitzes that maybe have never thought they were doable or approachable before, but with some money and with some support from National Geographic, it becomes something that seems feasible. So even for folks where that will be the first time that they're doing anything like this, we do want to support that. And to that end, we'll have grants of various sizes is the idea. So a small grant if you just want to dip your toe and do a local school event, all the way up to much larger if you want to have like a coordinated series of events around a region. Yeah.
Do you think you would have, NatGeo would have been as successful without the incentives with all the partners that you were working with?
Yeah, okay, I love that question. And we were just talking about this at work the other day. So we do use incentives quite a bit, like where we give prizes and raffle tickets and all these kinds of things. And we were just looking at research that shows that incentives do not matter that much. That what works best is intrinsic motivation. You know, is people actually participate in your event because they want to. So I think it actually makes more sense to invest in marketing and getting your message out so that you're reaching out to folks so that they understand what it is and why they want to be invested, more than kind of bribing them. Now, doing something like an evaluation, maybe an incentive is useful, because you're asking someone to do, like a teacher, to do additional paperwork. I know how much of a burden that is for a teacher. So that giving away some kind of prize for that might be good. But I think participation, usually the greatest motivator is intrinsic desire to be part of something. So you want to create a great event and convey, put effort into how you convey the purpose of that event and why it's important to participate. So people ask me a lot of how much it costs to do a BioBlitz, and you can spend a ton of money, and we have spent a lot of money putting on these major events. But I think you can do a BioBlitz essentially for free, because especially with involving like amateur experts from an Audubon center, so that those are your scientists, or even if you don't have any scientists at all, but you can get outside and record data on a tablet or a phone in iNaturalist, and then the online community will essentially be your scientific experts on help identifying. It's not as satisfying and it's not as much of a learning experience if you don't have an expert in the field with you, but you can still do it. So literally, a teacher could take his class outside in the schoolyard and do a BioBlitz with no additional money or support. Now, we're excited to give people money so they can do more and better things, but you don't have to have a lot of resources to do a BioBlitz. There's a great group in the San Francisco area called Nerds for Nature that just goes out once a month and on a lunch hour and does a 45-minute BioBlitz in a different part of the Bay Area, and they've added tons of observations to iNaturalist that way, with spending no money at all. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. And again, that's my email, and you are welcome to be in touch anytime. And I just work up the street from here, so happy to come speak to anyone or help with anything, and just happy to help anyone with any kind of citizen science you're excited to do. Thank you.